coming tonight? Did David call in at all? Well, we'll wait a couple of minutes.
Hey, you better, you might want to move your refreshing beverage there.
Yeah, smack it with the...
Well, that and/or if there's nobody next door, you might want to put it over there.
Okay.
Because I've been known to be sloppy.
I'd like to call to order the Monday, July 9th, 2018 regularly scheduled meeting of the Littleton Planning Commission. Could we please have the roll?
Commissioner Reynolds.
Here.
Commissioner Schwartzbacher.
Here.
Commissioner Stallman.
Here.
Commissioner Rudnicki. Commissioner Breidenbach.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Coronado.
Here.
Commissioner Allman.
Here.
And Commissioner Bolt
Is not here.
Not here at the moment.
What would you suggest we do? Seat an alternate now or wait a few minutes?
I would just wait a few minutes, and then as we get towards the end, if we need to, we'll just have, one of them either move up there or just vote.
Okay.
How's that?
If he doesn't, if he's not here at the start of our general business, then he'll be down here. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none. On tonight's menu, we have one general business item, and that is the downtown design standards. Minutes to be approved. We'll start out by saying the written minutes, there's a fairly large gap in the minutes. If you'd go to page 2. At the end, there was a Fourth Amendment was offered by Commissioner Stallman, et cetera. The vote was 5-2 against, and then right below it is aye 6, nay 1. I assume that was for the main motion, but it's all missing here in my copy. Looks like it was chopped off. Anybody else see that? Or you could look at it now.
See what you said again.
No.
Oh. Well, it says the vote was 2-5 on the motion.
Yeah, but then right below it is the...
Oh, so what was being voted on?
What was being voted on is missing.
Okay, yeah.
That was the main vote.
I'm sorry, it's the main motion,
Main
yes.
vote, yes.
Yeah.
Right, it's missing from the minutes. Do you see it yet?
I'm not sure where it is you're looking. I see underneath each one the motion carried by the following vote 6-1.
Well, there's four
and there was
amendments.
4 amendments.
And then in our copy here, after the Fourth Amendment, let's see, vote was 5-2 against with Commissioner Reynolds, et cetera, voting against, the motion fails. And then right underneath that is aye 6, nay 1.
That is the main motion.
Yes, but it's missing.
Doesn't say that.
Doesn't say that.
The very first paragraph in black.
The first paragraph is the motion carried by the following vote 6-1. That's the motion made to be approved as amended. The motion carried by the following vote 6-1.
Okay, got it.
That's just kind of how the system, the program works.
Okay, it's a little awkward to see one and then.
It is, yes, but adding in all the amendment text just spaced out the vote there at the end.
Okay. Are there any comments? Do we have a motion for the minutes?
I just had one question. Denise?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Just looking at the public comments, you had the individuals and their district, but a couple people you left out the district. Was that on purpose, or you just...
That's just what they said during them.
Thanks.
Yep. If they said it, I wrote it down. If they didn't say it, I didn't.
I move to approve based on the recording secretary's certification, the 25 June 2018 action minutes for the 25 June 2018 regular meeting of the Littleton Planning Commission.
Second?
Beat me to it?
No, I was offering. Anybody have a second?
Second.
You beat me to it. Okay, John has a second. Let's vote, please. We have 6 in favor and are missing...
Minutes?
Yes.
I reviewed them.
We have a 7-0.
Excellent. The vote's unanimous and the
Just in
motion
time.
carries.
Sorry about that. My
Okay.
apologies.
Next item up is public comment. This is a chance for the public to speak for 3 minutes on any issue on tonight's general business or other items. You have 3 minutes to speak. We ask you to be cordial. There's a list in the back if you wish to sign up to speak. If you don't sign up, we'll ask if there's anybody else that wishes to speak at the end of the list. When you have 30 seconds left, Denise will hold up a yellow card signifying 30 seconds. When your 3 minutes is up, she'll hold up a red card and please finish up. Don Bruns is our first speaker. Whoa.
I don't know what it's doing.
Great.
Well, I got to print it,
Okay.
so it could be worse. It's okay.
I think I'm just waiting for the image. Don Bruns, District 4. Good evening, Planning Commission. 2 weeks ago, Commissioner Stallman said, "We're not in the business of Soviet-style central planning. We do not create outcomes." But because all projects create outcomes, some beneficial and some adverse, you actually are creating outcomes, however unintentionally. And that despite not yet having identified what they are or should be before you act. Clarion acknowledged its plan provides, quote, recommendations to work with neighborhoods to try to identify characteristics they want protected, close quotes. But that provides no objective means to make it happen. Indeed, outcomes are not yet being explicitly addressed elsewhere, anywhere in the city, so the people end up being exploited and to retain colonizers' upper hand in terms defined by outside corporate business interests, and that is reminiscent of the Soviets. Mr. Stallman added, "We're not smart enough to figure out what all those things are, or should be, and we really need people who are adept at doing those kinds of things to come in and get creative in ways that we no way possibly could. That's most insightful because it's not smarts that are needed, and you do need help. Not greater intelligence, but new staffing skill sets are required to actually inventory citizen desires by discrete publics and places, and then plan accordingly. But how to do that is not a secret. In the leisure services field alone, customer assessment, planning, and service paradigms began to shift nearly 30 years ago. There is an urgent need to elevate planning practice above the dotted line on this diagram. Otherwise, we cannot move beyond only obliquely citing a few desired citizen outcomes and not knowing who wants what and where. For outcomes include people's desired beneficial consequences as well as undesirable negative end results they want to avoid. The city's community development paradigm has not yet explicitly moved beyond levels 1 and 2 signified by the green box. The exercise of community and resource stewardship requires expanding the city's staffing and planning paradigms to levels 3 and 4 signified by the purple box. The red text makes clear related cause and effect considerations. Community development must be constrained to have a reasonable hope of achieving affected public's community and resource stewardship desires. Therefore, affected public's community character and outcome desires must first be addressed before appropriate community development actions can be determined. The blue box encompasses a resulting more fully integrated and functional analytical framework. Thank you very much, Commissioners, and thank you, Commissioner Stallman. You did us a favor by your observations.
Thank you, Commissioner Stallman.
You're welcome.
Pam Chadbourne.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Pam Chapborn. I live a block and a half from here. First off, you have already approved your minutes. I'm going to suggest the agenda order is wrong because I'm not able to make my comment before you voted. I'm going to point out that public comment only includes the name, the district, and the subject, but not what we talked about. And you know what action minutes mean? It means that we came down here, we cared enough to take the time of our lives to read the matter, come to you and speak, and we had an opinion that we wanted you to hear, and that should be in these minutes. These are action minutes. You record our actions. That's required, and I want to see that in the future. I don't know why this comes and goes, but I want to see it there. I'm going to ask you to make sure it happens in the minutes of what you do. Now, second, I'm going to talk about general business, and this should not be an item of general business. There should be an opportunity for greater public participation and comment on this. And that's the downtown design standards and guidelines. So let me make a comment. It shouldn't be general business. There should be more participation. There should have been more participation by downtown residents. In fact, there should have been any participation by downtown residents in this process, and there was not. I live down here. I've appeared in front of Planning Commission, Historic Preservation Board, Fine Arts Board, and City Council, and I have cited code more often than most anybody I know. And I was not invited to participate. Now, I can understand why. Some people may say that that would be disruptive. Great, then at least you tried and you would have included a voice, but you didn't. And that may be staff, that may be you, but you should have included us downtown residents in this. The two people involved were business people who do not live down here, and one was new. So no, the participation in this was not good. And the goals, as Don mentioned, the outcomes are reflected in the objectives. Some of them have been left out. And this is fatal because when the next step comes, the objectives still need to be there to consider the policy changes. The ones that have been omitted, I think, are because they're not enforceable, and that isn't vital. What's vital is you maintain the objective. So I'm sorry, I need the projector still. Maybe most glaring and all that I have time for is Sub-Area 5, Main Street, in which, I'm sorry, could you have the light on the projector, please?
We'll wait till it comes up, but you have less than 30 seconds to speak. What's going on here? Oh.
So this is our downtown guidelines, and it's 1 to 2 story high buildings. And what? This says 1 to 3. You said there were no policy changes, and that's a glaring policy change. That must be changed back to 1 to 2, to be honest about this. Another one is in my neighborhood, another example, and it has to do with provide informal observation of streets and open spaces from adjoining buildings, and that assures that there's space between buildings to look around. It's great for parents to look for their children. It's great to keep an eye on your neighbor's property to make sure that nothing bad is going on over there. I don't see that anywhere. That's a very valuable criteria that's part of the character of downtown. I don't have time for more. I wish I'd been included as a participant. Thanks very much.
Thank you. For anyone that hasn't signed up that wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to general business. PC Resolution 15-2018, resolution regarding the updated downtown design standards and guidelines, now entitled the Downtown Littleton Design Standards. Could we have the staff presentation, please?
Good evening, Commission. Jocelyn Mills. I'll be presenting this on behalf of the city this evening. And I also want to let you know, we hired Bryant Flink Architects to help us with the project. So I'm going to do a presentation first, and then I'll have them join me up here for the second half of it. So just quickly on process, Planning Commission reviewed this document, the draft Downtown Littleton Design Standards, on June 18th, and they did recommend approval to you. You have final decision-making authority on design guidelines in the City of Littleton, so that's this evening. And then we are taking an extra step, and it will be ratified, or on City Council's agenda in August to be ratified. So we may need this to refer to. This is the area that we're talking about, downtown Littleton, and there are currently it's in 8 sub areas. So that's what this map is showing you, the different 8 areas. As you know, Council directed us to take on a community engagement process to update the document. We did create a small technical committee to help with that. Commissioner Breidenbaugh and Chair Rudnicki were also on that committee for the project, as well as members from Historic Preservation Board and some business owners and downtown reps, if you will. We also did have some open houses along the way, as well as we did send out postcards to all property owners downtown to let them know about the open houses and the online format that we were also using to capture as much input as we could along the way. And generally, the other outline the other direction I wanted to share with you is what was the intention behind this project. And the intention really was to take in the current downtown design guidelines and standards document, take all the guidelines and turn them into standards, create updated mapping so it was easier to figure out which sub-area properties were located in, create more local photos. And then lastly was about the format, try to make it more user-friendly. And so the document originally is 380 pages, that's the existing one. And so we were able to combine that and shrink that down to about 75 pages is the current document. So it does appear that the revised document in front of you does meet a couple of the goals in the citywide plan. And therefore, city staff, we are recommending approval of this resolution this evening. And not having talked to you before, Chair, we were thinking that the best way to approach this, I'll have Paul Bryant from Bryant Flink come up and join at the podium here, and we can just work through your comments and or just if you want to go through the document itself. With one, if we could, indulge you with us how we would like to start, and that is Commissioner Coronado had made some comments in the past that we have not addressed yet, so if you could, we'd like to start with that, and I have a handout.
That was your email at 4:58? Okay. But she's not done yet. I'm done. I got a couple questions. So none of these have been incorporated in the document tonight. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Thank you. Jocelyn?
So first, if you're okay, I'm going to invite Paul Bryant to come down to...
In a minute, though. Could you explain a little bit more detail? How many open houses did you have, and how were they advertised?
So yes, I believe we had a total of 2 open houses. I'll have to look in it's listed in the staff communication. And we advertised those in a variety of ways, including we sent both times a mass mailing to all property owners in downtown Littleton.
Okay.
And then it was in the Littleton report for the first one, and then we did by social media and on the city's event calendar, those type of outreaches were also. And then, you know, always when we do any of these planning projects on Littleton plans, on that page you can get online or get onto it, and you can see from the beginning how the project started, history all the way to wherever it is in process, as well as all the steps to completion. So we really do try to keep that updated as much as possible. And if you've signed up to get updates, then we periodically also send an update through Littleton Plans to whoever subscribed to that page to let them know kind of where we're at and what's coming next.
Where were the open houses held, and how many people showed up, roughly?
The open houses were held here. The first one was actually upstairs we have some training rooms on that side of the building. Okay. And we had staff to show you how to get to the room because it was a little hidden. And we had approximately 35 people, I believe, at that first meeting. The second meeting was held in the community room, and that meeting we probably had about 12 to 14.
Okay, thank you. Bruce had a question for you.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, before we go too deep, I'd like you and or the city attorney to provide context to get it on, out there, make sure everybody understands the relationship of what we're doing here to, assuming it's, ultimately approved as standards, to the zoning code. I think it's important to reiterate, probably can't say it enough, that the zoning code stipulates how properties can be developed, redeveloped, et cetera. And this is an attribute of that, but if you can provide a little of that context, it would be, I think, appropriate.
I'll start and then have Steve jump in.
Yeah, sure.
In our, zoning code is really, that's the regulations by which you can decide uses and redevelopment of properties. And within that, the zoning code in Title 10 of the city code, there's an element where it says that any adopted design guidelines, that's what the downtown design standards are. If any property is within the area of any adopted design guidelines, that you have to basically meet those. So the design guidelines are, in theory, more of like a overlay for this area of Littleton on how we want the design to look. It doesn't really, the design standards themselves don't regulate uses or things like that. That's the zoning code that you refer to, and then this is more of an overlay of the design.
So there's no, so height, floor area ratios, that kind of thing, this doesn't really have anything to do with that because those are already stipulated in the zoning code.
Correct. But the design standards, really what they do is they can give you direction on about the height and how we'd like that to be designed, or
the shape of a roof.
Yeah, but it can give you, hey, we like this feel, or these design components, but the zoning code is really where you set all of those standards.
Got it, okay.
Commissioners, basically in a traditional zoning structure like we have in Littleton, the zoning code will establish uses and the foundation for uses. Really what design guidelines are sort of an added set of property development standards. We have some property development standards in the zoning code, but then essentially these become additional property development standards for a particular area based on the uniqueness of this area. So they don't decide uses. I know I read some of the public comments that kind of reference, well, why don't these address uses? They don't address uses. Uses are addressed in the zoning code. Right. These address property development.
And really design is the focus, of the design standards.
Understand. Thank you. That's helpful, I think.
And we are not changing the zoning code.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. Paul is on.
Good evening, Commission. Paul Bryant with Bryant Flink, property location 2305 West Barry, next door. And then I have my colleague, Callan Meek.
Hi. Good evening, Callan Meek, and with Bryant Flink as well. And I'll just go ahead and use the same property address.
You could flip that down and speak.
Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, it's acoustics in here are terrible.
The concrete doesn't work too well for you, huh? Thank you for having us this evening. And this is the second time we've had a chance to be together. And obviously, Mr. Chair and Commissioner, we were able to work together over the past 6 months or so to refine this document. So I think, we want to open this up to sort of go through it. We have some questions, some potential changes or recommendations that was brought forth to Jocelyn. But before we get started, Commissioner Coronado had provided some very insightful commentary on the landscape architecture section that was unfortunately lost in transition when Dennis retired. Jocelyn found it and brought it to our attention, and this document right here addresses those comments. Now, why this is important is because it's not in the manual that you have right now, and it's not in the manual that was approved by HPB.
When did you get the comments?
We got the comments the night of the HPB hearing.
Oh,
so
okay.
We didn't have adequate time, obviously, to get them incorporated.
So you've had enough time to really look at them?
We've had enough time to look at them, and we put this memo together. And I think what's interesting is that this is a really, this is sort of a play-by-play of how the entire decision-making process happened as we went through this. And so and what I mean by that, if we break down this memo, it's sort of in 3 categories. And so it's sort of comments that we think make sense and we want to bring forth into the document. There are comments that need to go into a phase 2 because they are more policy oriented. And then there are comments that were noted, but they were not incorporated, or were not, the committee or the consultant is not recommending adding them to the document. So does that make sense, kind of, sort of how the process worked? I mean, Mr.
Well,
Chair,
this was a little bit of a curveball not getting this until 5 o'clock this evening. But we all have copies. I guess we can look it over.
Yeah, and we understand that it's the 11th hour, and we need to, but it's serious stuff. So if it the course.
Mr. Chair, I would recommend maybe we could put it up on the document reader, and then to start your review of comments, maybe we just go through what they are and articulate them out loud and what we're recommending you do with them. Would that be a good way to
Specifically, want to do it now, or okay?
Yeah.
Let's do it now. And then you'll get to your, you're going to have a general presentation on the entire document, or just start taking questions? That was a question.
Yeah, no, I think the intent of our meeting here tonight is to take questions based off of your personal review of the document.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Just a couple of questions. First of all, thanks, Jocelyn, for catching that. Second of all, Paul, thank you for putting this is a well-written summary,
sure.
and I've reviewed it very quickly in just the past 15 minutes, and generally I understand it, and I'm okay with it, but I think we should, for the benefit of the commission, I'll go through them all.
After we get through going through item by item, if you would chime up at the end, if I don't acknowledge you, chime up. And are you satisfied that the items propose that they will put in versus what they think is future? Do you consider them to be future, phase 2, or would you rather have them in now? And the items they say shouldn't be in there, do you want them in there? Okay.
Right, after we go through those,
right.
I can mention that.
Okay.
But I also did have the question about phase 2, and maybe it's a question for Jocelyn, if there's a timetable for that happening, or if it's just out there.
Phase 2, you mean? It's probably just out there.
Okay.
That's a good response. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Want to lead us through? Go
yeah,
ahead.
absolutely.
Fire
Yeah,
away.
and I think Commissioner Coronado can chime in too, since these were really his comments. So if it would be helpful, you can take your manual, and at each itemed number, it has a page 56, 57, and if you flip through your manual, then I think it'll make more sense with the comments. And we can go through this fairly quickly. So in this, I mean, Commissioner Coronado was asking for an example plan, and in the original standards, there was a diagram, and it was eliminated in this document. And so we have included it at the back of the memo on the last page. If you flip your memo over, this was not included in the document as it stands now, but it was in the adopted 06 version. And it clears up, well, you don't have to read the sentence 5 times to understand it. You can just look at the diagram. So we are in agreement, and we can add this diagram back in to the manual to describe that section a little bit more clearly.
Page.
Yeah, no, I got that. I'm just trying to find where it fits in exactly.
Yeah, really what it's, if you're looking at the diagram, it's tough to describe that central island, and the goal is to get the equivalent amount of landscaped space, but the sort of, the standards are allowing you to sort of bulk a landscape island in the middle to sort of break up the monotony so much of a large parking lot. So it gives the designer some flexibility as long as the overall permeable surfaces are equivalent. Does that make sense? Is that what your intent?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to have this diagram because you can tell right away how much landscape is expected. It's hard to understand that from the description, although I assume the description that you had was consistent with the way this is shown anyway.
Yeah, so exactly. So we would have included this most likely because it's a great suggestion and it needs to be included. So we're recommending that we have that in there.
By the way, commissioners chime in if on each item. Don't wait till the end. Okay, just like you. Okay.
Okay. All right. The next one, page 57. It just changed text to read, and other ground cover lower than 3 feet high. For example, mulch or perennials is needed when trees are substituted for shrubs. And we think it makes perfect sense because you have the option to switch trees for shrubs, so we're still trying to conceal some of the, at-grade cover.
And the purpose of that comment was to allow the designer a little more flexibility, not be as prescriptive, but be prescriptive in terms of performance, the heights allowed.
Right, and even with that change, 1 row of shrubs would still be required too.
Item 3, change text to read 2 feet when installed. And then this text change should be incorporated as suggested, adding the word when. So it's item 4, page 58.
Can you slow down?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, sure.
I'm still going through 2 here.
Okay, yeah, let's take all the time we need.
That's our first shot to read it, I suppose.
Yeah, no,
I didn't even get this at 5. I didn't get any email at 5, so I just got it at 6:50 or whatever.
Let me know.
Yeah, well, when the
Anybody
commission
let us
is
know
through,
if you're ready to go to the next one. We'll wait.
Yeah, there was a word missing in that paragraph. I'm looking at number 3. 2 foot when installed. It just said 2 foot installed.
Okay.
I'm still on 2, so.
Oh, sorry.
There's a lot more words here. And Craig, in some of these comments, are you, like I said, I haven't had a chance to look at this, so I'm seeing words that are in these comments in blue that are also in the document already. So are you changing I'm looking at 2, change text to read, and then there's a whole paragraph, and I'm seeing 3'6" at maturity, 2 feet installed. So what, I'm not sure what's being changed exactly.
I would like to clarify, if you look at like the A bullet point under it, it lists specifically what the change was. So in this instance, it was not much of a change. It was just adding a few specific words. It actually was not even changing the height. It was just adding the words when and shall be to, just for clarification of the statement. It's not changing the substance of the statement.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that. I wasn't clear on that either. So
speak a little closer there if you would.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I wasn't clear on that either. So.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, the bulleted A or B, et cetera, will sort of describe what we're recommending the change should be, and I think that might clear up, so item 3A, the text change should be incorporated as suggested, adding the word when. Sort of.
You're talking about number 3? No?
Yes, but I guess it's just sort of the sub-bullets, or what do you call those? The A, B, C. That's just sort of what we're recommending the change be, based off of the comment.
All right, I'm ready. You can move on now.
Okay, you got through 3, I think. Anybody have any questions, 1, 2, or 3? Go to number 4 slowly. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and take your time. I realize
I knew when I looked at this it was going to be a slog, so we'll get through it.
Well, we'll get through it. 4. So this is just sort of clarifying the language of a dumpster to change it to refuse containers. So the language would clarify that, outside refuse containers instead of outside trash receptacles. And perhaps Commissioner Coronado could describe, in your opinion, why refuse containers is sort of a more descriptive term of what we're trying to describe here.
I'm rereading what was originally in here. Outside trash receptacles, loading docks, open storage areas. I think my comment was to make sure we're capturing all types of refuse containers, whether they be considered trash receptacles, which are more site furnishings, versus dumpsters and other things.
If I may clarify just a little bit, the way that the language was originally written and originally pulled from the approved standards was kind of using refuse containers very loosely and sometimes referring as more of a specific thing and sometimes referring to both like trash cans and dumpsters. So we just clarified it to make sure that when those terms are used, it makes sense.
Is there a definition somewhere that defines refuse container versus?
We don't have a specific definition in the glossary, but there is a suggestion for the statement to say refuse containers, including dumpsters and trash receptacles. So it's clarified within the statement.
So, but is refuse container broader than those two terms?
Yes. It is.
So you're not really defining refuse containers by saying trash receptacles and dumpsters, because refuse containers are broader.
That's correct. We just want to clarify that the dumpsters and the trash cans that would be typical are included within that. The previous language was much more vague in the way that it stated it, so we just wanted to add that list after it to ensure that it was understood.
Any other questions on 4? Greg, you have any other comments?
No, I'm fine with the language.
Okay. Number 5.
Okay, page 58. Okay, insert adjacent properties and alleys into the list of screening areas. And so the text change should be incorporated as suggested, changing to say, shall be screened from public sidewalks, streets, adjacent properties, alleys, and other areas from which the property is visible.
Yeah, my concern there was that it was specific to screening these from view from certain areas, but not all areas, and or all areas that might not have control of that view, like adjacent properties and alleys and so on. It was just for streets and.
I'll pause here. Any other questions on 5, or am I pushing it too hard here?
If we could just go back to 4B for one moment.
No problem.
Okay.
We'll
So,
do the circle slightly moving forward.
It does look like and service areas got dropped from the draft text there in 3.3.3 because the initial draft says screening enclosures for refuse containers and service areas, but it looks like the service areas language got removed from the text in the memo here.
Got that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments on 6? Oh, no, we're on 5, I'm sorry. Then we'll slowly go through number 6.
So the question from Commissioner Coronado, should metal be called out as a specific material for gates? And so we're recommending that we change the text to say an opaque gate, omitting the word metal.
Again, yeah, that seemed too prescriptive that we were calling out
wood,
metal.
could be any opaque material.
I think that was inadvertent. I don't know if that was picked up from the prior one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Any other comment on 6?
Can you just hold on a second?
Sure. Take your time.
You know it does.
Okay.
You good?
Yep.
Okay. Number 7?
So the comment was to add with a solid lid to the covering requirement. So we're recommending that all trash containers must be covered with a solid lid.
That's saluting the flag. You do it. That makes sense. Okay. Any comment on 7? Craig, you happy with that?
No, that's fine.
Okay, good catch. Number 8?
Number 8, the comment, the 50% open requirement is only important when a fence is more than 2 or 3 feet in height. And so we're suggesting that the text should be modified to say, front yard fencing shall be a minimum of 50% open when it or where it is more than 24 inches above natural grade. And the idea would be that you could have a 24-inch high pony wall, masonry pony wall, and then above that you could have pickets, metal pickets, wrought iron, that sort of thing. But it allows the designer some flexibility in designing the fence.
Okay.
If I may add my thought in that is, sometimes there may be low retaining walls or a fence that takes up some grade there that necessarily needs to be solid in order to withhold the grade. So you're going to see over a 2-foot high fence anyway. It's not the need to have 50% of that open seems not necessary.
So I'm going to weigh in on this one, just so you know. So the zoning code does require that fences in the front yard anywhere in Littleton are 50% open. So that is a zoning requirement. So I think that in this case, I'm not sure that we're really going to make a lot of headway with this one because that's a requirement today in our zoning code.
So would that be moved to a different, is that moved to future phase or acknowledged but not incorporated? Is that?
Greg, what do you think?
If it conflicts with the zoning code, I would push it off to either a future phase or just not change it.
But I agree, if we put it on the future phase list, then at least we don't lose that context or that conversation.
So we're going to say that number 8 is pushed off the list to future? Is that correct?
We'll add it to the list that's proposed for future modification.
Okay.
Okay.
Because we're going to need a motion on this, and then I have a legal question after to see how this motion's going to work, but go ahead.
Okay.
Number 9.
So number 9, page 60. So the comment was the language and landscaped in such a manner to blend properly with the property and adjacent uses. So it was sort of cumbersome and open to interpretation. So it was suggested that it say, landscaped in such a manner to complement on-site and adjacent landscapes. And we are recommending that the change should be made as suggested.
Okay. So, if I may, as suggested in the adjusted language.
Correct,
right?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. I would just complement, I think is spelled with an E.
Okay.
But I'm fine with that.
Just to note, that looks like it's on page 59, at least in what I have.
Okay. Thank you. 3.4. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, thank you.
I have one comment,
Yes.
question on moving back to number 5. That is the screening of trash receptacles from public sidewalks, streets, adjacent properties, alleys, and other areas from which the property is visible. Would that include from above, if someone had like a rooftop deck or something and they were looking down, would it be screened over the top of the trash?
Generally, in our generally, the way that the standards are written today, it's from street view. So no, we really don't have a tool within the document to talk about from like a third story looking down.
Because I could foresee that could be a big issue with some of the redevelopment going on.
I think that's a great topic for the next phase. And I think we've got, I don't know if we do, but I think that's an appropriate place for that conversation.
Well, brings up an interesting topic. If you have a 2-story building with rooftop, you have a 3-story next to it, they're looking down. Very difficult to provide a roof over rooftop units that need air. It could be a thorny issue.
I think the comment to have hard-lidded refuse containers helps solve some of that issue, I would imagine, at least in this round. I have incorporated instances where the design team has been challenged with a 5th elevation, which is the roof elevation in certain jurisdictions, and that may be something to look at in the phase 2, describing that 5th elevation. But yeah, light and air and the mechanical units.
Well, you can advertise that you have a wonderful view of the mountains, but you also have a nice little view down to the alley. Buyer beware. Okay.
So I think we'll note it and put it into a phase 2 as things to suggest and study further.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. To move things along a little bit, Craig, do you have any problems with what they're proposing to move to a future phase, date uncertain? Also, they're the ones they do not wish to incorporate. Do you have any problems there?
Yeah, I looked through them quickly, and I think it seems appropriate to move those on to that phase 2. That's why I asked. I hope that phase 2 will happen, fairly promptly to address any policy issues and any sort of parking lot issues that we have coming out of this.
Okay. So, well, go ahead.
Okay, so I didn't get a chance to look at these future ones either. And we passed on 9, is that?
I'm sorry, did I not do one?
I'm having a lot of trouble with this because we're moving along. I'm trying to read. I'm missing comments. I don't understand, and then I miss what's going on. I don't know where we are now. Last I heard, we were on 9, and then we got off on some other topic. I'm just lost.
I believe for purposes of the conversation, what we're talking to you guys about tonight are what we recommend from Craig's input. And then I agree with Chair Rudnicki. We're just talking about the 9. David, so we can make sure you've gotten to that point. And then really I agree and do apologize that you're just getting it this evening. We're but we're intending to just help work through it. But the intention isn't that we're going to go through the remainder of this document. That's more, hopefully Craig has the ability to read through it, and then you guys can talk about it. You know what I mean? If you're ready to move it forward or what you want to do on the document in totality, that will be your discretion later.
If anybody feels uncomfortable with accepting this as an amendment, just like, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we tabled the discussion because we were missing the public comment, and we met 2 weeks later when everybody had a chance to read it. This would fall under the same, possibly fall under the same criteria. So if you're uncomfortable, make that part of your amendment to, postpone the vote until another meeting.
Right, and so, but for purposes what's being recommended to you this evening, just so you know, we're just going through those 1 through 9.
Okay. And on number 9, you made note of the spelling change on complement, like Craig said, okay. Yeah, could you explain to me, since I guess we're done with these, what happens with the Historic Preservation Board, that they approved this document without these amendments?
Generally, as you know, any process where it comes through, they made a recommendation. It comes to you. You could add other changes this evening. It's fine. They recommended it at the moment they saw it, and they had some additional changes as well. But it's your prerogative to add additional comments. We as staff will let them know, you know what I mean, what the end result was from Planning Commission, so they'll know at the end of when you do eventually approve this what the changes were. But it's acceptable. That's how the process works. You can make additional amendments to the document.
Okay. Any other comment on the 9 items? Down here? None? Okay. Well, let's move forward with your presentation. Or just throw it open to questions.
Well, I think, I mean, I can, sort of reiterate the objectives.
Yeah, that would be good to, what was this tech committee's charge? What's the intent? What was the council's directive? Go through that, please.
So we kind of went through that at the beginning.
Yes.
It was part of this is the second part of our overall presentation, but at the beginning, remember I stated those charges for you? Do you want just to say them again? Okay. So it was phase 1, right, is what council asked us to do, and I'll turn it over to Paul, with the intention that eventually, just for context, that there would be a second phase where we would take on more policy-related topics that are not currently in the document, and so we do have a list of those. It's not scheduled at this moment in time of when that will be. That will be a future conversation with council to get that further direction, but just to put the context of the next phase of this.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so thank you, Jocelyn. So the goals, right? It was to eliminate obsolete content, remove references to the transit impact overlay zones, remove diagrams that weren't illustrative of the standards, condense the existing content. So I think most of you are familiar with the 400-page manual. There was a tremendous amount of redundancy within that manual. And so we simplified it, and instead of having 8 chapters and so forth, we just have chapters from urban design, site planning, architecture, landscape architecture, and signage, and how they relate to the 8 sub areas that Jocelyn showed us a map of earlier. So succinctly state design objectives as well. I mean, I think they went on and on. I know some folks enjoy reading those objectives, but they became very, very wordy. And so we just consolidated the language there. Reformatted the pages as you see in your manual now. And then the main charge was to expand the existing standards. And what that was to take the guidelines that were not enforceable and convert them to standards which are enforceable. And so as the committee, as we worked together through this process, we discussed with one another, and then through the various channels, open house, et cetera, if the guidelines converting to standards, if that is something that we want to do, if that guideline is in fact something that needs to be a standard. And so that's what we did. We went through that process in a very similar format as this, and if we got to instances where it was policy, it was tabled. And then ensure compliance. In the manual now, every sub-area has a specific sort of checkbox for the standards, so sort of easily followed by a designer could come in and sort of untangle their sub-area and what they need to meet in addition to the zoning requirements. So that was the charge of the committee. And after, I think our first meeting was end of December, 1st of January, and so now here we are 7 months later, and this is the manual before you. We're happy to answer any questions at this time. I know we've met once before, and again, we've had 2 commission members who were in the tech group, very helpful. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, and we can take it from there. So, Callan, am I missing anything? So, Commission.
I think what we'll, if I have no objection here, maybe go through general section by general section, and then everybody can comment, rather than everybody speaking and throwing out everything at once. What do you think? Okay?
Sure. I have a couple preliminary questions.
Preliminaries are fine. Yeah, opening statements, yes.
No, just questions specifically. Yeah. You had mentioned that historic preservation had some changes. Can you just quickly summarize what they wanted different?
Yes. We had some formatting inconsistencies with how we had some bullets that were 5 tabs over instead of 3. We had some extra lines in between paragraphs. There was a misspelling.
Nothing substantial, just...
There was nothing substantial, no. It was purely format, if that's correct.
Okay.
Did HPB add the adding historical fact to each of this?
So that was contributed from our committee.
Whimsy
so
subcommittee.
The Whimsy committee, Bill Hopping and Mr. Chair himself contributed to this. And then some of the historical facts were taken from the Littleton Historical Museum. But it adds a little bit of color to the sub-areas, and I think gives it just a little bit of local touch.
And maybe I just didn't quite understand. So what was used as a criteria for converting, I guess, what was a guideline to a standard? So you guys talked about amongst yourselves as staff, consultants, tech group?
Exactly, and that's a good question. So really, the process was that we took all of the guidelines and reviewed all of them, and so I could pull up a good example. I wish I could right now, but if you give me a minute, of one that may not have made the cut, something that was really subjective and not enforceable. If that was a guideline that was, here was a good example, was paint colors. There was a description for light-colored paint colors. And so what is a light-colored? You can have a light gray. You can have a light yellow. And so that was really subjective and something that was removed. A good example would be a guideline on how to remove paint from a wood cladding. It was describing to the contractor how to do that. It was when that was a means and methods criteria, and it didn't make sense as a standard. If it was something that was substantive that was enforceable, then that was transitioned. So the fluff was taken out, essentially. If that can make sense. Now we have every edit we've made is we have all the record of all of it, so we can go back and pick apart and look at the decisions and the conversations we've had. But really, I think that's the gist of it, is the unenforceable stuff just didn't make the cut because it wasn't. Is that, Commissioner? Is that?
I think in the future, since certain things were cut appropriately, it'd be helpful to have that list of these were the things that were cut. So instead of us having to search through and compare the documents, it's a lot harder to do that.
Red line, in other words.
Yeah, a red line, or the list, these were taken out, and these were the reasons why they were taken out. Maybe even not that, but these were the ones that we considered unenforceable, hence we took them out. that's just helpful. And I have a question for Jocelyn. So on the technical committee where they had, a couple from Planning Commission, a couple from HP, and some business owners in that, was it ever considered just to have a resident on it who lived there, or how did that work?
There was one business owner who was also a resident downtown, and how we attempted to find someone as we went through next door, and there's next door leads, if you will, for each of our next door neighborhoods, and so it took quite a while to get a couple people who were interested in volunteering from the downtown area.
Thanks.
Any other?
But Robin, the thing I would offer, however, is once we got that tech committee started, it was great, but we did really do our intentional outreach to all of the property owners, because it was also important along the way to get feedback from everyone in the downtown. We couldn't have a tech committee of, all of the property owners, so that tech committee was to help guide and have the in-depth conversation, but that's why we had the open houses and had the drafts and had the study sessions with HPB and you and City Council along the way as well, to make sure we were really that we were doing as much as we could outreach-wise to ensure that there were many avenues for input.
Any other opening comments before we get into the sections? Seeing none, let's start overview. Any comments about questions, changes, overview?
I do. On page 7, at the bottom, the first thing is the population. You talk about the population in 1990 being 33,660, and then you go to 2014. I'd like to see that updated to something more recent. I mean, it looks like this could have been done in 2015, but here we are in 2018. We have 2017 census estimates. In fact, the population in 2017 was estimated to be 47,734. And just to make it as recent as possible. And then the next sentence, I'd like to consider changing. It says, after celebrating its 125th founding anniversary in 2015, the city continues to grow and diversify each day. And it makes it sound like that was the cause. The effect of the celebration was for the city to grow. If you could separate those into two sentences, the city celebrated its 125th founding anniversary, and the city continues to, you could have the same sentence, but it should be compound instead of a cause and effect.
That brings up a question, for these minor edits, can we let you, we'll get opinions here, let you know about them, knowing that you'll incorporate, and they sound reasonable to me, the two that was brought up by David, without having to do an amendment. We'll be amending all night.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the proper way to do this would be to simply have commissioners direct their edits to either Jocelyn's staff or to the consultant, and then they can be incorporated. These really aren't suitable for amendments. They're not substantive. This is the type of work that we would expect the consultant to just complete based on them being provided to them.
So we, just lump them all together and do an amendment, or just
no? There's no,
just do a list.
No amendment. Just simply
Okay.
provide those. Those could be provided to either probably through Jocelyn by email. If you have edits, just send them to Jocelyn by email, and she can work that out with the consultant.
Or we'll state them tonight. But then you will send us a list of all the items that are technical edits, please. After this, okay. So everybody will get a
However
copy.
you want.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments about the, what's the heading here? Overview. Seeing none, move on to the sub-areas. We have 8 sub-areas. Each one has a page and a half or so. of information, some little historical context, interesting facts. Anybody have any comments? Well, we'll lump it all together. Any comments about the 8 sub-areas?
I would just say I loved the little historical facts. That was a nice addition, and I learned a lot reading this.
Yeah. I think the reason we did that was, a developer comes in as it's just a piece of property. For us, it has value and history, and we cherish it. And we wanted to try to get that across so that it's not just a, random piece of lot in an unnamed city. It's a piece of property that has value to us.
I have a question, sub-area 5, page 16.
Sorry, which page?
16.
16, thank you.
It's the same question that came up in public comment. The first bullet being 1 to 3 story buildings when it was really 1 to 2. Can you explain how that is not a policy change?
Yes, so this is the existing character, and if I'm not mistaken, there are 3-story buildings on Main Street. Now, they are set back.
There are.
And so this is, and I also believe it's allowed in the CA zone district.
Well, CA zoning district, maximum height of structure is 40 feet or 3 stories.
So to address that comment from the public, that's the existing character.
Yeah, the picture in the bottom right on page 17 is actually a 3-story building. It actually doesn't step back, so they do exist.
I recognize that there's 3 stories there. That wasn't what I was debating, but what I was debating was the change to something. Yes, it's so your answer is it's a practicality, it's the reality?
Robin, I think, not to interrupt, but it's called under existing character, so the intention there is to talk about the character of Main Street as it exists today.
Today, as opposed to when this was first written, in that sense. So that's why, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I got a question about sub-area 2, under design character. The first sentence, I didn't quite follow it. I mean, I think I understand it, but it says new buildings should generally align parallel with streets, and then it says and fill gaps in parking lots. And I wasn't sure. I mean, it just is a little awkward or uncomfortable or something. Like, what are the gaps? Are those vacant lots?
So the gaps could be future gaps. In other words, it would be a parcel that is on a 40-foot wide parcel, and there would be maybe a little structure in there. And so the idea would be to fill the gap, fill to the setback, create the street wall, create the present along, in this case, I'm guessing that was on Sycamore, as well as the parking lots. I think it's the goal over the long term that street parking, or let me take at-grade parking lots would eventually be gone. And it would be filled with buildings, so sort of fill the gaps in the street wall.
Okay. Yeah, because fill gaps could mean that all the buildings should come together and have no distance between them, that sort of thing.
Right, and so in this case, there are required setbacks on the property line, so that would not be allowed. Whereas on Main Street, you can go to a 0 lot line. So it's sort of as use by right, fill your lot, create the street wall. I think that was the intent. And I will also add, Mr. Commissioner, that the existing character and the desired character were touched very lightly from the original document, because I think that was the major study that happened in the 2006 version that we were trying to avoid as best we could. We were trying to clean up some of the major discrepancies like we just talked about in sub-area 5. But.
Yeah, I'm just coming at it from a person who doesn't know. The same thing with the refuse container. Somebody comes in to town, they may not know anything about planning, zoning, real estate, and they come to this document as something that's user-friendly, readable. They can come to this and get maybe not a 10,000-foot view, but they can get a more user-friendly view of what's going on and what's happening, and fill in gaps is just a little vague to me. And the same with the refuse containers. I don't know what that means, you know. It's not, if I look up refuse containers as a definition, it doesn't exist. So I'm not trying to beat a dead horse or anything. I'm just trying to say that if somebody doesn't know anything about this stuff, we should make it as simple as possible for them to be able to follow.
I couldn't agree more in terms of the legibility of the document. I think, but this document is intent for designers typically, not for the layperson. However, I think fill in gaps is very vague, and I think that it's a good point. And I think ideally, you know, building from your setback to your setback might be more descriptive even for the designer. Okay. I could agree with that. I don't know how the commission feels about that change, but I think and that's my interpretation of that. And you know, there's architects and planners on the commission here, and I think that was the intent in 2006 when that was written.
Well, we were careful to try to not change text where we were mainly chartered to consolidate the document and turn the guidelines into standards. So I think we kept pretty focused on that and tried to retain some of that original wording in there and left that to the phase 2 if it was going to be further tweaked.
And I think that's a fair point. When this was written, the character of the 8 sub-areas, it may have a different vision now. There may only be 3 sub-areas in the downtown area when this process gets underway for a phase 2, and maybe the character is a little bit more defined. You'll notice in sub-area 2 along Berry, it even has its subset of its own sub-area within the sub-area. So there is some confusing language in here, but by changing the vision of each neighborhood would have been a policy decision, so we left that alone. But filling in gaps, I think that's a really, I think you know, the idea is to create the street wall. I think that's what they're trying to do.
Okay, thanks.
You know, the other thing I would add, and I completely agree also with making things as clear and simple as possible, but also please note that anyone coming to do anything in this area of the city, development review-wise process is everyone has to come and meet with the community development staff in a pre-application meeting where we go over all of the requirements that they need to look at to, you know, do whatever their project might be. So we do go over this document in pretty good detail with folks on how to use it. So just to also give you that context.
Any other comments about sub-areas?
This isn't just sub-areas, but I forgot to mention it in the beginning. I love how you've italicized the words that are to be defined. That's extremely helpful. I'm wondering, can we also link it to the definition?
You could absolutely link it to the glossary, absolutely, and that's a really good point. In fact, I think that was your comment in our study session, was to italicize or make bold the glossary terms. There are a number of things in here that appear to be hyperlinked when the document becomes approved and it's sort of online for the public to use. All of those links will then become active, and in the same breath, we can link glossary terms. Absolutely.
It'd be good to do that.
Anyone else? No? Well, my turn. Just one item.
Wait a minute, I get something.
Okay. I'll wait. Or
or
Craig wants to be the last speaker again.
Yeah, right. I was just going to add to that. I was just thinking about it as she was talking about links. Is this sub-area, full sub-area map? If you click on one of the sub-areas, that it would take you there.
So the staff has actually built a hyperlinked map that you'll be able to link from the map and it'll go to the sub area and all the parcels will be identified. So that hopefully would.
And the other thing we're working on is connecting that to the zoning districts too, so you'll be able to see your underlying zoning district as well as your sub area, because that's the other piece that's really important for people to know.
Cool. Good. Page 16, that's for sub area 5, Main Street. Last paragraph, you talk about the importance of Main Street and Rio Grande Street, that piece, the old gas station that's now, Rio Grande, I think is the restaurant, as being a...
Yeah, Grand Station.
Yeah, Grand Station, yeah, being very important, requiring, important focal point and gateway to downtown. So you flag that, which I love. That's one of the 2 important gateway properties. Then you go down to sub-area 7. I was going to do this as an amendment, but I'll read it out as maybe it just is an edit. I'm sorry. I go down to whatever.
19.
Page 19. This is the area that has the melting pot. To the south is Toast and Sushi Place. It's that site that I'm speaking of. The sushi restaurant, and the Toast site. That to me is more important as a gateway to Littleton. More cars passing by that along with the backside of the fondue place is rather back alley-ish. So I wanted to add under desired character, if redevelopment, I'll just read it out. If redevelopment occurs at the southeast corner of Bowles and Santa Fe, special design attention must be given to the parcel's role in maintaining a Main Street character, complementing the Carnegie Library building and enhancing this important focal point and gateway into downtown. So that to me is, I've taken some of the wording from East End, the old gas station, and applied it to this site. So I can leave it to the commissioners whether they want that as an amendment or is it an edit. I think it can be an edit. I don't think.
Mr. Chair, that can be an edit, and the staff will just treat that as an edit.
Okay, I've got a copy I can give you afterwards.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fine addition.
Yeah, that is really a critical site for the future. Okay, any other comments about the sub area, the little page each sub area? Okay. Hopefully I'm not rushing too far. Standards. Any questions or comments about the standards master checklist? Seeing none, hearing none. If I'm going too fast, slow me down. So we got to four parts here. Urban design, site planning. We've got the tables, and then we roll into orientation, then we get into the standards. Any comments about this section? Lead the way.
No, go ahead.
I'm confused as to which standards, but we're moving back to the 1.0, 2.0, those sections. Are we there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I do have some comments on under.
What page are you looking at?
I'm looking at page 49, General Standards 2.4.2. My comments here are led by some comments that Greg made in this, so I'll refer back to that. But on number 2.4.2, that paragraph is not written in the same context as all the others. In other words, it doesn't have shall, should, could. So if you read that, it doesn't flow in the same way that other standards within the document read.
So you're jumping to
highlight architectural fenestration, entry and access points, landscape elements, artwork with accent lighting.
49.
So it should say something like architectural fenestration, entry, access shall or should, blah, blah, blah. Right? So that whole paragraph needs to be rewritten in the same nomenclature, I guess, as the rest of the document. But what led me to read that paragraph specifically and find that issue was, if you go back to Greg's memo, which I know we covered, but under contents acknowledged but not incorporated, number 6, there's some discussion about bollards. Bollards are mentioned as an acceptable lighting option, but it looks like this doesn't really, it says refer back to 2.4.2, it really doesn't refer or state much. So my recommendation is that we incorporate some of this language that Craig laid out, like unique lighting types such as, rather than just say bollards.
If I may, so I agree. Now, there is one thing I wanted to make sure that we're all aware of, that the city has a lighting manual. It also has a landscape manual. And so we tried as best to refer the designer to those documents, because those are what's governing lighting and what's governing the landscape. Now, in terms of that section, bollards are, in our opinion, landscape lighting and not architectural lighting. So they wouldn't be in this section necessarily. They would be under the site lighting portion of the document. But be that as it may, I think 2.4.2 needs to be rewritten with shalls. And does everyone know what a bollard is? So they're often 3 foot tall, round cylinders, and they're used for safety and traffic. Sometimes they're just concrete that keep you from running into the ATM. But often they're used as lighting and along pedestrian pathways, and they have sort of a nice indirect lighting that shines down on the pedestrian pathway. So they're rarely ever used for architectural lighting.
All right, we are jumping ahead a little bit of where I wanted to go.
Get back to 1.
We're on, if we could stay to number 1, which is urban design site planning. We'll then get into architecture, we'll get into landscaping, and then we'll get to signage. We'll do it section by section, so rather than flipping all around here, we stay in one section. Any comments about number 1, urban design site planning?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So I've got a couple questions. On page 30, section 1.2.7, I don't know the answer to this. So you guys use a definition of, there's something referred to as a primary residential entrance and a secondary entrance. Are those terms of common usage in the design world? So is it pretty much everybody who does this stuff knows what's primary versus secondary?
Generally, ostensibly they would, but we had seen your comments, and we could easily create a glossary term for a main entrance, and it's defined.
Probably wouldn't hurt. I mean, I don't know, if as you say, if this is being used by people who do design and architecture and stuff and they get it, okay, but to cover the bases, maybe that makes sense to just throw the definitions in there so there's clarity. I mean, I could guess, but I'm not entirely sure I could tell you what's one versus the other.
Mm-hmm. No, I think eliminating room for interpretation makes a lot of sense. Okay. While everyone's on that page, if I may, just to jump back to the guideline conversion to standard, it just so happens we're on a good page for this. 122, so if you're on page 30, let me read the guideline that was converted. Sharing of vehicle entries between 2 adjacent parking lots is strongly encouraged. So that was the guideline. And so now in the standard, the number of widths of driveways and curb cuts shall be minimized to reduce the overall impact of vehicular access across a sidewalk. Sidewalk continuity shall be preserved whenever possible. So it wasn't enforced, but now we're saying we want to sort of gang these together and minimize the curb cuts. So that's sort of how that was. Anyway, sorry, I didn't want to take the questions, but I thought we had a good opportunity to describe.
That's a good example. I mean, you leave some wiggle room in there. Sometimes you just can't gang them together.
Well, and there is some, the staff does have the ability in instances to sort of veer, I guess I could say. Anyway, please continue.
Okay, so the next one was page 31, 1.3.2. Why would it be a bad idea to stop that paragraph on the the last sentence being continuity of the building frontages along the street, period? So in other words, if I understand what this says, what you're trying to do is basically eliminate side surface parking lots along Main Street. Why don't we just say they're prohibited, period? I'm not entirely sure. Is there an example of unless no other site access exists on Main Street for a side lot? I'm not sure what that even means.
I think you could strike that and have it be prohibited. My sense is that it's a carryover from the original manual.
Okay, I don't see it as a policy issue. I just think the intention is, you know, pretty consistently, we want the Main Street frontages to be essentially what they are as they exist, and I'd be hard pressed to say there's no other site access beyond a, you know, front door, back door, whatever.
I think there is some properties on, I think my guess, not having been here when this original document was created, I believe there is at least one property on Main Street that, from a purely property ownership standpoint, only has access from Main Street. So I think that's what this was intended. Correct. So this is saying, if you took that out, I think it would say then you couldn't have access from Main Street into the site.
Doesn't the new Littleton mixed-use building being built right now, that doesn't have access except from Main Street?
I think so.
Okay, so if there's
probably talking about the property just to the east there, I think.
Yeah, you're talking about.
And the one going in now.
Yeah, you could be right. So, I mean, if there's a legitimate reason for it, I guess, yeah, an example is helpful. I was trying to think where that would come into play. So obviously, if that's the case, then I'm fine with it, I guess. So, okay.
We do agree with you, and it still gives us that ability as staff when we're meeting with folks to really say, unless this is your only access, here, this is what you have to meet for a standard.
Okay, I think that's fair. Okay, I'm good.
No, you're good?
Yeah.
Any other comments on 1? Good. Okay. Scroll down here. 2, architecture. Got our little table here, then we get into the meat and potatoes. Any comments?
Yeah, I got one.
Got a few?
Well, yeah, maybe a couple.
Jump it again.
I'm sorry. So page 48, 2.2.1R, right at the top, says, do not paint, stucco, or otherwise conceal unpainted masonry, particularly brick, walls, where possible. I would like to extricate the where possible, because I don't think there's any situation where we'd prefer to, you know, for example, have painted masonry or so forth and so on. I mean, is there...
yeah, there's sometimes, if you have a brick facade, if I may jump in, if you have a brick facade that's been patched, modified, old windows bricked in, it gets to be a mess, you know, holes drilled into it, trying to save the color. Sometimes the paint can hide a lot of sins there. If you do a little prep work, I can't see getting rid of it altogether.
Well, but I mean, at what, so fair point, well presented. At what point do you make it an option of last resort as opposed to first resort? Is there a way to stipulate? I mean, the idea is we'd prefer to see brick.
Well, if it's on Main Street, if it's a contributing building, you could.
Well, HPB is going to dictate if it's contributing. But if it's non-contributing, or anywhere else for that matter, you'd still rather see, theoretically, you'd rather see brick, but to Mark's point, if there's a good reason to do it, but I mean, I guess the question is, how do you convince someone, if you can, we'd prefer brick, stucco, whatever. If it's really hosed up, then.
Right.
So we actually discussed this during the HPB meeting. And so this is obviously, it's good to revisit. We could add some language where sort of the useful natural life of the masonry is no longer.
It's deteriorated past.
Something in terms of its life is gone, because often, and we see this, we even paint brick to preserve the integrity because it's so porous, it's sucking in water and it's blowing out, and so you're saving the masonry wall by actually painting it. So perhaps some language.
Add that to the list of edits. Just a one sentence.
Okay, it'll be something.
Qualitative.
It'll be something in useful life of the masonry, or the deteriorated masonry, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay.
The Chambers Farm building on Bowles, that's painted white because that brick is in such poor condition. So
that's not a bad reason.
That was part of the restoration of that historic structure.
That makes sense.
Who typically determines whether the brick is has met its life expectancy? I mean, I could.
Yeah, and you could have staff, or I mean, I think.
We'll put you in charge of, brick police.
I think, an architect would be able to provide that professional opinion, engineer. But ultimately, I guess it's the staff that would probably have to require a letter from an architect or an engineer, I imagine. But I think we'd all know it when we look at it, if it needs to go or not. Okay.
Further comments on 2? You got anything left? Jason?
On page 46, illustration 2.2.5, and
46.
Where it's illustrating sort of the different types of joints when you're merging thin brick and cultured stone at a corner. The illustration appears to show the same material, like the hatching is the same for the two different materials. That may be a really minor quibble. If the architects among us think the designers would get the point without changing the hatching, I'm fine.
Say that again. What's your comment? Sorry.
So if you look at the hatching for the mitered joint, it appears to be showing the same material rounding the entire corner.
So that's intended to have the same hatch as it turns the corner. It's not really mitered. It's what we're trying to avoid. Is masonry doesn't miter. It's a one solid block return. So cultured bricks or thin bricks now make a return to make the corner more.
It's a better quality corner. The simulated corner, a miter joint is not good, and neither is a butt joint. It shows the thinness of the material. So I get it.
Yeah, so you're wrapping the material around the corner before transitioning to another material. Is that what that's showing, or is it just showing a single material wrapping?
So a good example on the southeast corner of Main and Prince, the pink brick is a thin brick, and you can look at the corners and you'll see there's grout joints at the corner, where a traditional masonry building you wouldn't have grout joints on the outside corners. And then when they have their soldier courses, you can see, not that material is bad, it just doesn't invoke what we're trying to preserve in the character of downtown.
Right, so it's showing wrap that single material around the corner.
That's right. Yeah, well, the masonry. Yeah, and really we don't want to transition any material on an outside corner from a material to another material, which is what this is trying to describe and prevent.
To help clarify a little bit, the top row of illustrations there is showing the condition where you switch to a different material.
Okay, great.
I could see an architect, a designer coming in and, he wants to do a 2-inch cast stone. I mentioned this in our tech meeting, where it's 2-inch, and there would be, you could have them make a 12-inch by 12-inch corner piece, but normally, and that's the style, is you will see that 2-inch on one side or the other.
Sure, and I think, masonry is 2 3/8 of an inch, traditional masonry, right? So you'll see as it turns the corner, or 3 5/8, it depends on what it is. So if it's...
Yeah, but if you have a 24 by 24 stone, you're not going to have a 24 by 24 corner piece. That would be a killer.
No.
So I could see the city looking at that and saying, okay, this is fine for cast stone, 2.5 inches or whatever.
No, thank you. That explains it.
Okay.
Any other comments about the architecture? Yes.
Just going back to page 48, as I was reading 2.2.1 and 2.2.4, there's something about the sentence structure there that's a little uncomfortable, I think. Do not paint, stucco, or otherwise conceal unpainted masonry, particularly brick, walls where possible. It starts out with like, do not, and it ends up with sort of you will. Something about that, like it seems to me like it should say, do not paint blah 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 unless otherwise necessary, or
I think that's what they're. Or started out the sentence out with that, unless otherwise necessary, or where possible, do not paint.
It's just like the where possible, and it's the same in the first sentence on 2.2.4 where just the first sentence, when it says when possible, which is kind of saying something positive, whereas it starts out do not do this. So it may just be English sentence structure that it just doesn't seem right to me.
I just want to make sure, 2.2.4?
Yeah, 2.2.4R there, where it says do not resurface or replace wood siding with other materials when possible.
So,
unless it seems like it should say resurface or replace wood siding with other materials when possible. But when you put do not in there at the beginning, it just doesn't sound right to me. I may be wrong. An English major might be better at that, but
yeah, it doesn't agree with itself. Yeah,
might be just a tweak in the sentence structure.
Or it could be
spoken by a man that will go through this with a fine-tooth comb when he's coming in with a design. Yes, but
or it could be similar to the change to 2.2.1R we had discussed earlier, where it talks about the useful lifespan of the brick. Say don't replace wood siding with vinyl or metal siding unless certain conditions are met, or it's the wood is completely rotten. But even then, it seems like there's other materials you could use that are more wood-like a hardy board type.
Page 47. So are you still writing, or are we okay? Page 47, 2.2.14 what does 2/3 of the way down, specially treated concrete masonry units, what is specially treated? Is that like glazed units or something along those lines, or just what? Or is that old wording from the old 2006 document?
I'm guessing that it is, because I don't think we beat this one, but I would guess that specially treated is fluted, or is it split face, it's ground face, it's not your typical cinder block. So it would have to be in the family of decorative masonry, not...
Well, you might then do a little editing there and say, textured, and in parentheses stay, fluted or split face, something like that.
Would it be appropriate to add architectural?
Yeah, I was going to say architectural concrete masonry.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Thank you, avoided a few extra words I put in.
And that's different from architecturally cast concrete? which is already in?
Yes, so what Mr. Chair was talking about are the cast stone or cast concrete. If you imagine a building that has a concrete lintel over the windows, or sometimes they have some filigree, that's often cast concrete or cast stone, which, so it is different. A concrete masonry unit is a cinder block, basically.
They don't make cinder block anymore.
Well, I know. But
concrete block.
It's a concrete masonry unit, so it's 16 inches by 8 inches by 8 inches.
Okay. Oh, okay. So it's architectural concrete masonry units. Is that what you're changing it to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we would remove specially treated and replace.
Okay. Specially treated.
Okay. Any other comments about the architecture? I'll give you a second to scroll, see if you find anything. Seeing no rush. Oh.
I don't know. It's a consistency thing on page 49 under general standards for building lighting 2.4.2. It says flood lighting an entire building is not allowed. And then the next one says that flood lighting of residential structures is prohibited. I mean, they both say the same thing, but would we want them consistent?
Where's that?
Yeah, there's redundancy there. Yeah, it could be eliminated because it's a general standard that applies to all sub areas.
Which is it?
Well, I was referring more to the language saying is not allowed, and then in the next sentence saying is prohibited.
I like prohibited.
Yeah.
That's fine. We'll make it consistent. But I think it's okay to repeat it. I think that it just helps create the intention behind it. And the second one really talks about a sub area. So it really just helps us reinforce that with applicants.
Right, yeah. I'm comfortable with it being repeated as residential, yeah.
Not allowed to prohibit it.
No, if you're uncomfortable with anything, bring it up. Don't be shy.
Yeah, well, I think that, so to Jocelyn's point, I think that does make sense. I mean, we're sort of reinforcing those two residential pockets. So why don't we just revise not allowed to just say it's prohibited, and then the language will.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right, I got one.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm not sure where this overtly fits. I had initially considered it maybe under landscape, but since it says building lighting, one of the comments acknowledged but not incorporated talks about things like accent lighting. So a number of years ago, there was historic preservation had an issue with a contributing structure in the district, historic district, that wanted or sought to put, I don't even know what you call it, but for the sake of a descriptive argument, you know, like blue lights along the peak of a roof. I don't know if that's an accent light or whatnot. I didn't see those specifically prohibited in here, but given the design standards we're going for broadly, I think they should be prohibited. I don't think that's a policy issue. I think it's, I don't even know, I'm not entirely sure what's in the lighting standards at this juncture. Maybe they're prohibited in the lighting standards. Jocelyn, maybe you can answer that.
I believe in the current lighting standards, we do allow decorative holiday lighting, generally within whatever holiday you're referring to. So,
all right. But not permanent.
But not permanent, I guess, unless someone were to say they had some holiday that they, you know what I mean, celebrated. If someone
Like
were
what?
to come to me and say, well, we have a holiday we celebrate year round, I don't know how I would say
Festivus
no.
or something? Is that what we're talking about?
But generally, we remind folks that it's supposed to be holiday, so it's
Yeah,
not
I don't think there's an
year-round.
issue with holiday lighting that's temporary for some finite, well-understood period of time. But the concept of, you know, putting lights on roofs, to me, if it's already handled in the lighting code, I don't have a concern. I didn't cross-reference, so I don't know specifically if that's the case. But I think since we're covering a lot of design standards in here, I think calling out those kind of quote-unquote accent lights should be as prohibited is a fair inclusion to this document. You know, the bollards and those kinds of things, I guess, are more landscaping oriented, which wouldn't have to do with building lighting, in my opinion. I guess you described them as pedestrian safety related issues, for example. So maybe something in here about stipulating those kinds of accent lights are not allowed is appropriate.
I think that, along with what they were saying earlier about that 242, to rewrite that section, I think that honestly is a good opportunity to put that into that a little bit more clear.
I think that'd be appropriate. Yeah, I agree.
There, I guess I think to provide the right direction, which specific lights are we, what is the language? I think this one could spiral down a rabbit hole. There's volumes of lights. So
right, but I think we can rewrite it. I understand what the comment is about that rope lighting or whatever it is.
Decorative lighting, could it be? Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so we'll work on, I think we can get something close to that.
I mean, as an intention of what is desired, some of the stuff is, I honestly think this, the document, and I'll say this straight up, I think this is you guys, the team in particular, and compliments to, Mark and John and the rest of the folks who were involved. I think it's an exceptional piece of work that really provides a lot of value that we needed and didn't have. I think we're just talking about tweaking a good document.
Yeah, no, and we want to absolutely agree. And thank you for the compliment. We can rewrite the paragraph, and I think to Jocelyn's point, I think we have an understanding of, I think of where you're going with that.
Gotcha. Okay, good.
Okay, we're still on architecture. Anything else on second chapter? Seeing none, landscape architecture, well, we've already had quite a few discussions about the landscape. Anything else? There we go. Go ahead.
All right, not to monopolize this. Page 56, the first paragraph, I guess it's 3.1.4, even though it starts on the prior page. We're talking about tents. I guess my question is, where tents and other similar structures require a permit, I was just going to ask if you guys all think this is the appropriate place. I mean, I don't think of a tent as being landscape architecture, but it has to go somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. I think the document is trying to incorporate the front setback, if there is a front setback, into the public right-of-way. And so the photographs obviously are using Cafe Terracotta, because that's sort of using that the front setback in that fashion that sort of promotes activity and pedestrian access. I think what the document is saying is that you can't use your front setback to essentially create more square footage for yourself. You want to give it back to the community in such a way that it contributes to the public right of way.
Okay, I'm raising it if it's satisfactory as is based on your considered opinion. I have no issue with leaving it as is. Just was curious.
Yeah, and I think the other important thing to note is they are allowed per the zoning code. You can have a permit for tents, but in the nature of the view corridors and things that we're trying to preserve within the character of downtown,
it's good.
You can't obstruct your primary facade. You could have a tent on your side yard all day long, but that's sort of, I think, the intent of what that's after.
It was interesting. I mean, and again, we don't say this in here, and it's in a different section, but my recollection was the city holds what's referred to as a view corridor easement with respect to Carnegie Library, which is a pretty unusual piece of legalese, but it exists, and it does give the city rights to an unobstructed view of that particular property and the title to the, when it was conveyed to the city, as I understand it. So I don't think that needs to necessarily be in here. It's pretty property specific.
Exactly, and I think, you think of the Geneva Lodge. Well, what happens if that happens to be what happens to preserving that view down Sycamore and even on Alamo? We've got property with deep front setbacks.
I agree. Yeah.
So it happens. It could happen at any location really with a deep front setback.
Deal.
In addition to Carnegie.
No, sounds good.
Other comments about the landscaping?
I do.
Yes.
I want to revisit the lighting situation.
Yes, please.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 63.5.2. That sentence about the bollard lighting, I still would like to see that changed to something like on-site pedestrian lights shall be mounted on buildings with possible lighting such as bollard projection, uplighting, accent may be acceptable options. It seems odd that bollard is called out there.
Okay.
The only thing we probably couldn't put in there is the uplighting, because we do require everything to be downlit in Littleton, but otherwise we can absolutely add that based on the lighting code.
Yeah, I think we can sort of revisit it in the same vein that we talked about sort of the decorative lighting. But again, the Chapter 15, of Title 10, I mean, that's where the meat of the lighting code is. But we could provide, these are general standards, and we can certainly, I think, make sense to have some language in there. But I think the intent really is to promote architectural lightings on the buildings and then sort of sight light through the architecture, as opposed to big 14-foot tall pole-mounted, fly catchers or fly attractors, I guess you call them. Okay, so we have.
I did want to go back to one of the comments that you addressed in here that was not incorporated. Mm-hmm. It's on the last page, and it's number 3. And I just wanted to make sure that you understood the comment and that it wasn't addressed. So it's on page 57, 3.2.4, and it's the second bullet. It's actually on page 58. Where it starts with a landscape zone from 4 to 8 feet wide, extending blah, 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 planted with space. So it talks about plant heights, but then at the last sentence it says, and a metal railing fence or solid masonry wall at least 3'6" high. And my question was, should there be a maximum? Because it says a minimum of 3'6", and 3'6" seems large for front yard fencing. I think the response was that this didn't apply to front yard fencing, but the way I read it, it's between the street and the parking lot, so that would be a front yard, right? Or it would be facing, it would be street facing at least. I don't know if it'd be a front yard, but is that?
So I want to make sure, so it's, are you suggesting that we have a maximum height?
Because I think the intent of this bullet was to screen the parking lot.
Correct.
Right? And so we're saying that there's a minimum of 3'6" high wall or fence that would be an effective screen right there. But there's no maximum height. Could it be 8 foot high or 12 foot high, or it might make sense to put a
Hold on, I'm finding it. We have specific requirements in the zoning code relative to fences, including if it's a commercial fence. So really, I think that we probably capture it that way, but I will find the section and let you know. But I think we're covered with that, but I'll let you know.
Okay.
It captures the height limit? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think that answers my question. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on landscaping? Seeing none, last but not least, signage. Any comments?
Just let me get to it. So for the signage, The sections all had pictures except 4.7, which is the ground sign, and 4.8, the marquee sign. Did you consider putting pictures in just to show examples of them as you did with the others?
I can't answer specific why that was omitted as far as a photograph. Yeah, I mean, I think we can certainly and I think if there are good examples within the city that we'd like to see in this document, I think absolutely we should put them in. Marquee signs, only one comes to mind, and I frankly don't believe that it's the marquee that the city deserves. So I'm not sure we may have a photograph of a marquee sign, but I think a ground sign, unless the commission has an example of a good marquee sign.
I don't think it's an absolute sin if you take a photograph from Inglewood or something once in a while. I mean, we're mostly Littleton photographs here, but it would be nice. I agree. Let's do a little editing and add some photos that show what a marquee is. Because that was confusing. I remember to us, the tech committee, what this meant.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we can find some wonderful examples of. I talk about Portland Schnitzer all the time. I think that's a wonderful example of. I mean, it's a major city, but I think we can find some nice photographs that could fit well.
Are there any? That general question, is there any photographs that you still want here that aren't in yet, or is it pretty well complete?
I think apart from some signage, I think we're pretty happy. We selectively didn't over-photograph per some of the tech committee's suggestions, and but if the commission thinks that there's some other photographs that would be more evocative, we certainly could consider adding more.
Nothing's come up yet except for this last comment, so.
The only one that was considered that really wasn't fulfilled was an aerial drone shot from the courthouse, sort of an aerial of Littleton that was discussed. But this document isn't, it's, the city's going to change, and then in 15 years or 5 years or 10 years, that aerial is going to be obsolete, where some of these signage photos will be applicable down the road.
Well, they did a lot of aerial shots in 1910, 1920. You got a 1921, then you got a 2018, one above the other. That would be pretty cool. And so what, the 2018 is obsolete?
It has historical relevance down the road, there's no doubt.
Put it in under the another whimsy box or something. Okay. Any other, I don't see any other comments, signage, anybody? Okay, glossary, definitions, anybody want to include any additional definitions?
I think we agreed refuse containers.
Mm-hmm. I think we should add it.
And then there was one other.
And primary and secondary entrances.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right. Those were already discussed.
Yeah, if we could add that, that's okay. So you've got your list going, so we are going to get a list. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? Entertain a motion. I got to ask a question first. There's quite a few landscaping items here. I think we should be voting on this rather than doing an edit. What's the
voting on this?
Yes. What's the commission's druthers? Treat it as editing or do it as an amendment? Because there's 9 items. We talked about deleting number 8.
Well, if we've got a list that's coming to us that incorporates that, we can just say subject to the edits discussed during the meeting.
Okay. Everybody agree to that?
Or it could be included in the motion.
See a lot of, I'm sorry?
Or it could be included in the motion, just,
it could be included in the motion. Yes, that's true. Okay. Then we have a motion.
Why don't you go ahead and make it, since you've sort of coalesced the whole thing.
Well, I'm not going to make the motion. You're going to make it. You're my motion guy.
Oh, yeah, that's terrific. That is special. All right.
By the way, I'm not looking at the motion.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Okay, I move to approve PC Resolution 15-2018 to approve the downtown Littleton design standards subject to the following conditions. Number one, the comments proposed as modifications in the Bryant Flink Architecture and Design Memo dated 9 July 2018, excluding number 8, be incorporated, and the other edits as discussed in the meeting herein also be incorporated as collected by staff.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
John seconded. Do we have a discussion?
I think it's
general comments.
I think it's good. I think the comments, the edits are strong. People really went through this diligently. I think, as I said earlier, I'm impressed with, the breadth and the, well, let me say it this way. I think it's a functional document, it's a pertinent document, and I think it's an impactful document. And if we can put that kind of work product out on the street, I think we've really done our jobs.
Just to pile on there, it's a lovely document, very well organized, has wonderful examples from downtown Littleton to illustrate the concepts that are being discussed. And the street names are labeled on the key map, which really helps. And finally, gain new appreciation for Prince Street.
Greg, I think you were going to say something.
I agree. Kudos to the consultant team here. Nice job on incorporating all the comments that we made, and to Jocelyn for shepherding that through. Especially like to give kudos to the motion guy. That was a great motion. I couldn't have done that.
I second that.
Motion man for life. Okay.
God forbid.
All in favor?
I'm opposed.
Overruled. Anyone else?
I was going to say many hands have been involved putting this document together, so thank you to staff, the consultants, and to the tech group. It's a great document.
Yeah, I agree. This is definitely another win for us. And in the past, we've had some long continuations and some things never getting done. And this is, we could sit here and talk about minor edits all day and for weeks, but I'm happy you guys pushed back a little bit on making too many changes, keeping the flavor of the existing documentation, and pushing off some further revision to a phase 2. I think that is a good idea, and it's important. I think changing too much at once could really backfire on us. So it's a great document. I really appreciate everybody's work on this. It's been actually a pretty long process.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Well, my comments are, and I was involved with the 2006, what were we thinking? 190 pages or whatever it was, but it does...
100. 384.
300?
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
Pardon me. I can't count past one hand.
Really 400, actually.
Yeah, but who's counting?
Yeah. Well, your eyes glaze over after page 150, so I lost track. It does, this document consolidates a cumbersome document, and I think it's a very good document. It goes from guidelines, and it's in essence is saying, pretty please, please do what we hope what we want you to do. Pretty please. It goes from that to you shall do this. So it does put the hammer down and requires meeting standards. whereas before you could drive a truck through the document. I analyze this as an architect, and of the standards, 70% of the standards are common sense things, decent things to do that I think any architect and self-respecting developer would do. And by the way, it helps their bottom line to do something, to do a nice job. It'll make them more money. 20% of the standards, developers and architects would grumble, but they'd go along with it. 10%, the last 10%, they would probably fight, but basically the response would be, welcome to Littleton. This is how we do things, and if you want to be in our precious downtown that is our crown jewel, you will do this. So, live with it. I like the fact that it doesn't change policy. We avoided changing policy as much as possible. That's left to the city, council, citizens to change height limits, setbacks, that type of thing. It doesn't change the zoning code and uses by right. At any rate, I think it's a user-friendly guide, and again, it's more enforceable than it used to be. Any other comments? Seeing none, it is time to vote. Everyone? Okay.
All right, the vote's unanimous and the motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Commission.
We're eagerly awaiting that list of edits.
And we took detailed notes as well, so we can cross-reference to make sure we got everything.
Okay, next up is comments, reports, community development. Anything to report? Okay. Mission members, any comments? I do want to reiterate something that you said. We should feel proud that we have tackled 3 items in fairly short order. When normally we don't get things done, or we vacation half our meetings in the past. We don't do that anymore. We're busy now, but we have finished the light rail station. What we call it? It's a framework. We have gotten through the Bellevue corridor study. I think it's still going to council, and tonight is this. So that is a big 3, but it's just the opening act of what's coming up. And I remember asking you, because we were getting done with these 3 items fairly rapidly, and I asked Jocelyn, gee, what are we going to do? And you smiled at me and said, hang on to your hat. The announcement of the comprehensive plan, which is going to take a monumental effort by all of us. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a 2.5 year process probably. But we have made progress here in the last year. It's just been wonderful. With that said,
can I go back to, I'm sorry, can I go back? Could I make a comment?
Yes.
So, Mark, making that statement does remind me, as you know, we've had a brief study session in the past with Kending and Keast, and we have hired them to help create a citywide vision, and that project is happening right now. We're doing some community outreach. July and August are really the push to get community input. Just to plug that, on Littleton plans, there is a page called Envision Littleton, which is this vision project. And on that is the survey that we are asking community members to fill out about your vision for the future of Littleton. It takes about 2 minutes to fill out the survey. And so July and August are really the push to get that community input. Kending and Keast does come in July, and then we have them scheduled to meet with certain groups, but our intention is to, we'll be going to community events, whatnot, also outreaching this, and hopefully we'll get a lot of community members to participate. I hope you all as well. And I do anticipate that staff will be following up with you individually on, making sure we'll share more detail of our engagement plan, and then, whatever additional items that you want to present to us as planning commissioners, we want to hear those ideas as well. And so the idea would be then that in October, then we come back with a draft plan or concept around the vision statements, and that would be a study session with Kending and Keith with Planning Commission, then also with Council, and then we would be vetting it in October timeframe with the community as well to see if we heard correctly what everyone gave for input during July and August. And then hopefully it would be adoption by the end of the year, and then, yes, rolling right into the comprehensive plan, which would be a major push in 2019 with the intention to have that adopted by the end of 2019.
And I always ask, how's our Pell study coming? Is that, they formed the committee, are you meeting?
Yeah, I'll get you an update on that. I'll ask Public Works. I know we've been working on it,
Okay.
so, it takes a while, but it's getting at least started, I believe. So I'll follow up with you and let you know.
Thank you. Any other comments? Officially, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.